Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for attending my presentation. My name is Mike Stangel. I'm the general manager of Geni.com. And I appreciate you coming and spending your time with me here today, and also want to welcome our streaming users as well. We appreciate you being here virtually at least. I wish you could see this beautiful city with us, but this will have to do for you. So I'm here today to talk to you about using Geni and how our collaborative approach is different from other genealogy programs. If you read my syllabus, I made a bold claim in my syllabus. I said that in 2007, we started what is arguably the most successful family tree that interconnects all of us together. I hope to be able to back up that claim in the next 45 minutes or so. But before I start, I have to say that I'm extremely proud of what our users and our curators have accomplished in this regard, because for us at Geni, our goal was to build a platform that enables collaborative genealogy, but the content, our world family tree of over 135 million profiles, was built by our users and by our curators, and the work that they have done is really a testament to the project, even more so than what we ourselves contributed. So if you are a Geni user, if you are a Geni curator, I hope you're as proud as I am of what we've all done together, because it's really an amazing thing. So just to sort of preview, just to preview what I'm going to discuss today. So I want to talk about how Geni might be helpful to you in publishing your work, also into leveraging the existing work that's already done on Geni, how our approach might help you break through brick walls in ways that perhaps you haven't been able to using other techniques. And then I just want to touch briefly on our philosophy of evolutionary improvement on Geni, because it's a little bit different than maybe what you've seen elsewhere. So let's talk about why perhaps you want to use Geni to publish the work that you've been doing for many years. So if you started doing genealogy about 30 years ago, this was probably the way you published your work at that time. So this is, of course, just a family history book, a binder put together of all the photos and all the documents and all the names and dates that you could compile. And there were really a few problems. If you were doing this in the 80s, chances are that the work that you did, if you could compile a book like this, if you were lucky, you could make 2 or 3 or 5 of these and distribute them to your family members, but you really had few opportunities to distribute your research to a wider audience. So you may have been working in isolation for decades, or if collaboration was your thing back then, that usually meant stuffing your research into an envelope and mailing it off to somebody to share what you found and hoping to get something back in the mail several weeks later that you could use to update your work. So you were self-publishing this kind of work. A lucky few maybe could get a professional publishing agreement, but I would say that was probably rare. And unfortunately, if you were working in isolation, after your passing, it's really hard to know what would happen to all of your hard work. There's a good chance that books like this are stuffed into the back of closets somewhere, and unfortunately may not be revisited or may not be available to your descendants. So about 20 years ago, we had the rise of the webmaster with the internet, which was a tremendous revolution in self-publishing, because you could create your own website to document your family tree. And this really solved that publishing problem for you, which is a tremendous improvement. But there's still some problems with this kind of approach. So updating your website of your family tree would be a slow and tedious process. Even if you have software that generates HTML pages for you, typically this involves regenerating these pages periodically, using something like file transfer software to upload that to a web server to replace your web pages. And really one of the biggest problems with self-publishing like this on the internet is that every site is going to have a different look and feel. So for those people who are coming to your website to view what you have to offer, it takes time to sort of understand what your website looks like. how to find the information here because it's different than the last one I looked at, and so forth. So the look and feel and the different formats of the data could be problematic. And as it turns out, it's still difficult to reach a wide audience with a self-published website like this because you're competing on the internet with hundreds of millions of other web pages, and unfortunately you're competing in internet search engines to try to get your pages ranked highly into search. And that turns out to be a difficult problem as the internet has grown larger and larger. It turns out that you're competing with a lot more information. And it might be that someone looking for information about your family history may not actually even be able to find it just with a typical Google search or Alta Vista back in those days, if you remember that. So enter Geni. We launched the site in 2007, and we feel that Geni addresses several of these problems. First, by providing a consistent framework. So when you come to Geni, all of us are working within the same structure for the family tree, for the profiles, for sources, and so forth. And I'll give you some more specific examples of those. But we feel like by bringing it all together on a single website, that of course we're then providing a consistent interface for people who want to come see what you have to publish. They can easily see how what you have compares to what else is on Geni and elsewhere. And it also solves that problem of what's going to happen to your research 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, because we certainly have every intention that Geni is going to be here for a very long time. So as far as finding your information on the internet, Geni has gone to the trouble of hiring people who are experts in search engine optimization, or SEO. So for example, when I do a Google search for Jansen genealogy, Geni is the #1 search result there. So we've put the work into making sure that when you want your information to be found on the internet, Geni is going to help you make sure that it's there. Now, privacy matters a lot. If we're going to work in a collaborative family tree, then we're going to have some concerns about what happens if we have photos of our children, names and dates of people who are still alive. And so Geni has addressed that with a lot of engineering work behind our profile privacy model. So as a Geni user, you can select at a very detailed level which types of things you want people to be able to see on your own profile. And then as far as the other profiles that you're going to add in the family tree that you build, living profiles on Geni are always going to be private. What that means is that I'm not going to be viewing photos of your children or your brother and sister, nor are you going to be viewing photos and names and dates and locations of mine as well. Even your parents and your grandparents, even though they may be deceased, if you choose, you can make those private on Geni as well. Now, of course, we want some people to be able to see those, so Geni's software allows for close family members to be able to see information that distant or unrelated people may not be able to see. And like any good genealogy software, Geni is going to support source citations. So every profile on Geni has a sources tab to where you can upload your sources, in this case, a census record. I've confirmed a MyHeritage record match to a Social Security death index here. And we can use these as source citations as evidence that the information that we're publishing is accurate. So this is going to be really important because you don't really just want to tell people even where your data came from, but by actually uploading your sources, you can show them firsthand. They can view those sources and prove to themselves that you've done your homework. So also on every profile on Geni that we have wiki text biographies. So this is rich content that you can add, not just names and dates and locations, but you can also write your stories of your family members. And you can format that similar to what you might do on Wikipedia, for example, including embedded images, lists, and so forth. So the biographies on Geni give you an opportunity to really fill in your family tree with rich content that you don't just get by viewing a simple family tree interface. Now, of course, Geni allows you to upload photos, and in fact, you can tag individuals in those photos if you notice the green squares here on this tagged photo, when you tag a person into a photo, Geni will automatically create for you a silhouette, or I'm sorry, a cropped version of this photo to display as that person's profile photo. So you can upload one photo that's got the entire family in it, tag individual is in there, and when you view those individual pages, you'll see just their faces, and then you can click through to get the entire picture of the photo. So this is just sort of a rich photo interface that you might not have just anywhere else. And it's not just about family trees, it's not just about profiles. Geni also gives you the option to create projects for your work. So for us as software developers, a project is just an open template that you can use. Again, it has that wiki text formatted open area where you can add a description of your project. In this case, this is passengers of the handmade vessel in 1630. So maybe you want to create a project about a particular town where your family is from, or maybe you want to create a project about your family's occupations. It's up to you. As a user, you can use our projects to build just about anything you want. And it's really amazing. I'll show you some more examples later of some of the things that our members have used our projects for. Now, of course, you can also tag your family members and the profiles that you add into these projects. So the projects become a focal point then for the profiles that you add to Geni to see how they relate, not just in the family tree, but in some other way. And for some people, it's really important that when I put my information on the internet, that I'm given credit for that work. You know, one of the worst things that can happen to you when you publish your family tree on the internet is to have somebody copy it, publish it as their own work, maybe even change it, adulterate it, make it wrong. And that's something you never want to see happen. On Geni, the idea is that we're all coming to one place to publish our work. And if you're the person who added a profile to Geni, that information is going to stick with that profile for as long as it's on Geni. Furthermore, we have an extensive revisions history. This is really important in a collaborative environment because if somebody's going to make changes to profiles that you originally added, you're going to want to know who made a change, what was it before, what did they change it to, and hopefully they provided a source as well to explain why they would make a change. So all of that is done for you on Geni so that we can accurately represent who's providing the information on the site. And one of my favorite features, if you're going to be an international website, you're going to have to support multilingual names. So not everybody had names in different languages, but in some cases it turns out it's really important. And of course, Charlemagne is a perfect example of this. And so as you add your names to Geni, you can add different language tabs and fill out those names as they're known in different local languages. So for example, if you're viewing Geni in English and you come to the Charlemagne profile, you will see his name as Charlemagne or Carolus Magnus on his profile. And although it's too hard to see, the smaller text below shows you the alternate language names. And if you view that same profile on Geni while you're using the site in German, then you're going to see him as Karel de Groot. And here in the Netherlands, Karel de Groot. So this is a really powerful feature on Geni. You won't find this anywhere else, is the ability to represent people as they were known in their local languages. So even if you decide publishing on Geni isn't for you, that maybe you just don't want to put your information there, that doesn't mean Geni has nothing to offer you. So another opportunity for you to use Geni is to leverage the existing research that you'll find already there. And I can already see some people bristling saying, well, I would never copy what somebody else does. I don't trust that. And I have to say two things about that. The first is you cannot do it all yourself. So if you've been working on genealogy for 20 years and you've got 30,000 names in your database, that's fantastic. That's a lot of hard work that you've put in there. I can tell you I have over 100,000 blood relatives in my family tree on Geni, and not because I put in that much work, but because I'm collaborating with people who are also doing the work. And so sure, you might take the time to document your ancestors, but what about all those brothers and sisters, the aunts and uncles, all of the descendants of those people? It would take you more time than you can possibly have to document all of those individuals. And as a result of this, I've found third and fourth cousins on Geni that I had no idea even existed. And while that may not seem important to you, if you think about who was at that aunt or great aunt and uncle's wedding, it's not really just your blood relatives who were there. There's a whole other side of the family that attended that wedding, and they may have photos that you'd be very interested in seeing, but if you don't ever make contact with those people, you may never get that information. And the second thing I would say about leveraging the existing research on Geni is that none of us is as smart as all of us. So of course, none of us are as smart as you, I understand. But if you think there aren't any mistakes in your research, then I have to tell you that's only because nobody's ever spot checked it for you. And so on Geni, you're going to have the benefit of millions of other users also looking at your work. You can correct me when I'm wrong, and I'm grateful for it. And perhaps I'll find something I can correct in your work as well. So coming back to sources then, of course, one of the most important ways you're going to know that the information you find on Geni is correct is that you're going to look at the sources that other people have provided on the profiles on Geni. This is how we cross-check each other's work. Furthermore, Geni has over 200 volunteer curators. These are subject matter experts in all different fields of genealogy. This is a short list just from the top of our list of curators, but if you scrolled down this page, you would find 200 of them listed here, and in most cases, they'll tell you their area of expertise. Sometimes it's geographic, sometimes it's a time period. We have experts in colonial America, we have experts in medieval genealogy. There's a lot of good resource here in terms of the other people that are using Geni that you can take advantage of. Now, the curators in particular take stewardship of the historical lines of the tree. So they're not going to tell you that your grandmother's not your grandmother. But if you go find our profile for King Henry and try to add a brother onto him, a curator is going to step in there and say, hang on, unless you have a source for that we don't know about, it can't be here. So in that sense, our curators in particular protect the integrity of the historical lines of the tree, and they also spend a great amount of their time helping other users use the platform. So I'm personally very grateful for our curators. And one of the advantages of taking advantage of what's already on Geni is that you don't have to rebuild that line that goes all the way back to Charlemagne. It's already on Geni, it's already well documented, it's already using the latest information, not discredited information, and that frees you up to spend time on working and researching and documenting lines that maybe are less well researched that really need your attention. Another way you can take advantage of the information on Geni is by looking in our discussions. So every profile is going to have a discussions tab, and this is really where we collaborate about information on a particular person. So in this case, on James Mitchell, we have a discussion that somebody started that was suggesting that we review this James Mitchell biographical sketch that was recently published. So this is a place where when you look at the discussions on a profile, you're going to see what other people have been saying about this person, where they're getting their information. Maybe if there's common misconceptions about that person, you're going to discover that that's already been discussed on Geni. And you can add your own discussions as well. Now, discussions are not just on profiles. We also have open public discussions. So this could be a more broad topic. You might come into our discussions and say, hey, I'm really interested in researching my Sicilian ancestors, and I don't know where to begin. Does anybody have any suggestions? And more often than not, when you post a question like that, someone's going to come in with a suggestion to at least point you in the right direction. So that's a really powerful tool in Geni. And then revisiting projects as well. I said you could use projects if you had particular topics about your family or your research that you wanted to publish. But there are already almost 100,000 projects on Geni that our users have created. And they cover every topic under the sun. So if you have a special interest that you want to see if Geni has, I really recommend coming into our project section, doing a quick search there, and see if we already have somebody who's working on that. So not only would that let you see what they've published about that, but it helps you connect with other users on Geni who have the same interests as you do. And then lastly, I want to discuss messaging on Geni. So here I've got the profile for William of Orange. And highlighted in blue over on the far side there, you can see a link called Contact Profile Managers. So of course you can start a discussion on this profile, but I guess there are times where you want to discuss something a little more in private. Certainly if it was a more recent profile, or you want to discuss the profile for Aunt Martha, you may not want to do that in a public discussion, in which case when you click that Contact Profile Managers, it takes you to the Geni messaging system. So one of the advantages here is we don't have to give each other our email addresses. We don't have to run the risk that we're publishing our email address to the entire world. It's all done within the Geni messaging system. You can send your message here. We've automatically addressed it to everybody who's a manager on this profile. And at the bottom, we've attached a link to the profile where you started the message from. So if you're talking about a John Smith, the recipients of that message are going to know exactly which John Smith you're looking for, talking about. Now, I'd love to tell you that every profile on Geni is going to be well-sourced, but the truth is, sometimes they're not. People often want to build their family tree as fast as they can, and when they do that, they usually add names and dates and just keep on moving. So sometimes you are going to find unsourced information on Geni. That doesn't mean it's completely worthless. What it means is now you have some names and dates that perhaps you want to follow up on in your own research. You don't take it as gospel, but if you're looking for how to get through that brick wall and somebody else has a suggestion on who that person's parents are, well, it's a whole lot easier to do a search for names that you can see and find out for yourself whether or not you think that information is accurate. So speaking of smashing through brick walls, so I told you that the Geni approach might help you break through those brick walls in ways that you traditionally can't in your normal research. And the real big problem here is that we don't know what we don't know, right? So when you don't know what's on the other side of that brick wall, it's really hard to find it. On Geni, everybody contributes their own findings, and so you might have somebody on the other side of your brick wall building that same family tree from the other side. So it's not uncommon, for example, for you to build up to an ancestor, and when you're stuck, it turns out that somebody from the other side of the family happens to be building up from the other side as well. And if their research leads them down to you, that brick wall may just suddenly disappear overnight because somebody has discovered that your profile matches something they're already working on. We merge those together, and now you've smashed through that brick wall. Even if perhaps they don't find exactly your profile in the work that they're doing, sometimes when you build up that tree to your brick wall, you're stopped at a name and a date and a location, and you're done there. But on Geni, you can take those names and dates and locations, and you can say, do we have other families who are also from that region, from that time period? Maybe, although we can't find the exact same people we're looking for, we might find that there are other families living in the same area at the same time. And if they're already well documented on Geni, then often it becomes just a small task to continue working on the work that's on that side to see if it overlaps with where you've left off. So one of the huge advantages of doing this in a collaborative tree is that you have millions of users working on not just the other side of your brick walls, but all sides of everything. So this picture was a visualization that the MyHeritage Chief Science Officer did. This was only 6,000 individuals from the Geni World Family Tree. So imagine if I could give you a diagram of what 135 million interconnected profiles would look like. It's astounding, the size of the family tree on Geni. And it's not at all uncommon for people to come visit us at a conference and discover that their grandparents or great-grandparents have already been documented on Geni. And it's, at that point, just a very small task to get yourself connected to Geni's World Family Tree. Now, for those of us in the States, it's often a common case that our trail goes cold after an immigration event. So it's real easy to research our ancestors with U.S. census records, for example, but as soon as that crosses over into, Poland or Prussia, that gets really difficult for us because we can't do that kind of research from so far away where we don't have access to records, churches, courthouses, that sort of thing. On Geni, however, it's very natural that those kinds of problems are solved for you because we're going to have users who are also in Poland or Czechoslovakia or Germany or the Netherlands. The Dutch tree is really strong on Geni. And so if you have ancestors from those areas and we have users who are building up family trees from those areas, suddenly it's very natural that the work that you've done may tie into what they already have. Even if it's not natural, there's other ways to get help. So if we have a Geni user who's from the town where your family came from, you may be able to reach out to them and ask for their assistance in researching your family. And I think you'd be very surprised at how helpful people are willing to be. Geni also supports DNA with a partnership with Family Tree DNA. So when you put everybody's DNA into a single shared combined family tree, it's like supercharging those DNA results. Because at that point, you're aggregating everybody's DNA, thousands of users, all in a single family tree. And with that, we can do some really powerful things. So, of course, we can tell you that if that third cousin's autosomal DNA matches yours, then great, give it a check mark, you've confirmed that relationship. But also, if you have a match and you don't know how that person is related to you, on Geni, because we're all building family trees, we avoid this problem that you have sometimes elsewhere where you want to look at that match's family tree and discover that there's just nothing there. So on Geni, our whole point is building the family tree. So when you have a match, it's almost certain that you're going to be looking at someone who's already documented at least as much of their ancestry that they know. And Geni has some powerful tools for comparing those ancestors side by side with your own to help you identify, do we have common surnames or common locations, to find out where that common ancestor is. Now, if you take a Y-DNA or a mitochondrial DNA test, Geni does some pretty neat things with those. So not only will we post that DNA to your own profile, but we're going to propagate that DNA haplogroup to other profiles in your family tree according to where we believe those people should also have the same DNA as you. So for example, if you've taken a Y-DNA test, we're going to propagate your Y-DNA results up 10 generations of your paternal line and back down to all the male descendants in that family tree. We're going to tag them as having presumed DNA. And if it turns out that somebody else from maybe another side of the family tree has also propagated their DNA and there's a conflict, then we have a mystery to solve, right? And one of my favorite DNA features on Geni is that when you have a conflict like that, what we're going to do is we're going to take all of the people in between you and the person whose DNA does not match, and then we're going to find all of the living descendants down the paternal and maternal line if it's mitochondrial, and we're going to say these are the people you need to have tested for DNA because they can help bisect this problem so you can figure out where the discrepancy lies. So it's a really neat feature. It's only possible if we have everybody in the same family tree together. Now, I said we have a philosophy on Geni of evolutionary improvement. And just to touch on that a little bit, it's very difficult to tell somebody that they should never publish their research unless they're 100% sure that those 10,000 names are 100% accurate. That's a tall order for anybody, least of all somebody who's enthusiastic about genealogy but still getting there. And one of the reasons, though, we have to tell people that is because if we're working in a model where we copy from each other, then it would be disastrous for somebody to publish a mistake and for that mistake to be copied and copied and copied and copied, because by the time it's copied 100 times, you're never going to get that horse back in the barn. That mistake has now become, internet canon, if you will. On Geni, we don't have this problem because we're all working on a single family tree. Of course, people make mistakes. But when they do, and somebody discovers a mistake and they correct it, that mistake is fixed for everybody who uses the site in one place. So we don't have this worry about mistakes getting copied all over the internet because we keep it on one site that we all share. So one of the problems is we don't revisit what we think is correct. So once you've done some research, you wrote it all down, you published it in your software, your brain puts a mental check mark on it and says, done with that, let's move on to the next thing. Well, I was recently looking at a profile of one of my relatives here, Pauline Stangel, and I happened to notice that even though she died in 1854, somehow she married in 1882 and had a child in 1884. Oh my gosh, well, who's the idiot who put that in there? Well, of course it was me. But and I tell you this not because I want you to think I'm an idiot, but because I want you to realize that we all do this, right? We make a mistake. We went too fast through something. We thought it was done, and we moved on to the next thing. If you don't come back to your own information, which you may not, those mistakes are going to linger. On the other hand, if you're sharing it with other people, someone's going to notice that, and they're going to say, hey, you've got a real problem here. We need to figure out if maybe there was another Pauline, or did you document the death date wrong? So these are things that become more likely to be discovered and resolved in a collaborative environment rather than when you're working alone. Another problem with working alone is that lingering misconceptions are going to prevent us from challenging the status quo. So if we go to a site where we see 100 versions of Charlemagne and they all say one thing, and you've got one person over here who has something different, if you're not sure, what are you likely to believe? Well, probably these 100 people have it right and that one's wrong. But that's not always going to be the case, right? So when you allow people to make copies of mistakes, then again, like I said, it becomes internet canon. It just becomes lore that you can't ever get corrected. By working together on a single shared resource, it becomes better information for all of us to share. Now, I know this can be hard to read, but the problem here is that also non-primary sources, research that we rely on, sometimes evolve and change. So, for example, there may be a book that, there's a revision 2 and a revision 3 on it. In this particular example, there's a comment here where someone says the previous work that was done has since been discredited by the research of Dr. Ames. So in a collaborative environment, we have the opportunity for people who may be reading information that we haven't caught up with yet to say, hey, I know you thought that was right because it was published once before, but things have changed, we've got new information, this is no longer correct. Again, this is possible in a collaborative environment in a way that if you're working alone would require much more work than you could probably do by yourself. Also, when you're working in isolation, it's really hard to make big changes. So in this particular example, we had a Sephardic Jewish line where it has been the case for 150 years that this particular line was believed to have a particular descent. And one of our curators stepped in and said, I've been looking at this and I really don't think the evidence is there to support this connection. He started a discussion on the profiles. He said, unless someone has better information, I think we need to sever this line. Now that's an unpopular thing to do. And if you tried to do that by yourself, if you publish that on your website, everybody would just forget that guy, I'm not going to do that. By working together on this, we have the opportunity to say, if I'm wrong, now's a good time for you to tell me that I'm wrong. And it turned out in this case, no one could provide solid evidence for the dissent that we had on this line. And so we severed it. And that would be a difficult thing for you to try to push individually, even if you're sure you're right. But when we're working in a collaborative environment, we can put our heads together and say, yeah, you know what? I know that's unpopular, but you were right. And I want to give you a preview of a new feature that's going to be coming out in Geni here in another month or so, and that's going to be our Geni consistency checker. So if you're a MyHeritage user, you've already seen something similar to this on MyHeritage. We're working on something very similar on Geni. Right now, our curators are beta testing it for us. They're giving us a lot of valuable feedback, so we're going to be improving the user interface and tweaking a little bit of the mechanics behind it before we release it for all of our users. But of course, the idea is this is automatically going to flag for you anything that we can see in your family tree that looks questionable. So if you've got somebody who would be 118 years old, maybe you need to have another look at that profile. It might be time to update that because perhaps they've since passed on. So the Geni consistency checker is running constantly in the background. In fact, we've had it running in the background for more than 6 months, which means once we turn it on for you, you'll have no work to do to get it started. All of your results are going to be there waiting for you. And we think this is going to be a really powerful feature to help people identify where there are problems in this giant 135 million profile family tree. So just to summarize, I want to reiterate that we feel that Geni has created for you a sophisticated platform that provides a consistent user interface for both publishing and consuming the information on Geni. We have strong privacy controls, rich content that involves wiki text and photos and documents, an extensive revisions history so that you can always see who's making what changes, and that also gives credit where credit is due. And then powerful tools for collaboration on Geni, because that's really the only way that together we're going to be able to document much more information than any of us could ever do in isolation. So with that, I want to thank you for your kind attention, and I'd be happy to take questions. Any questions? Great. Yeah. Sure.
There is nowadays more or less 4 million Brazilians around the world. How many from every country are immigrating? It's not a phenomenon that was finishing 100 years ago. The immigrations are fields that Geni could help too much. I know Catholics, Japanese, from the 15th century that stay in Japan until perhaps the 20th century, and now they are Catholics, Japanese in São Paulo, Brazil. You have many histories of immigrations with different groups from these countries, Japan, Israel, Brazil, not only in Europe and United States, that are the big clients of MyHeritage. Perhaps you can say something about this.
So I'm not sure exactly what you want me to say, but I will say that the Geni projects may be an excellent way to capture that kind of information, right? So we can capture information about individuals and say this person immigrated from here to there, they changed their religion and so forth. But in order to aggregate that information, in order to say, was this a big movement, was this a small movement, that's something that you could capture as a Geni project, in that you could sort of then start documenting what happened and when, and then you can start tagging Geni profiles and say, these are the people that we know of who have profiles on Geni that were a part of that migration or part of that movement. So that's potentially a feature on Geni that might help with that. Yes, question over here. Yes, you, ma'am.
I'm new to Geni. I've been researching for 30-odd years, but I'm new to Geni. Would you recommend me starting from me as the starting point to enter Geni, or to start at a brick wall and enter Geni?
That's a good question. So I think it's a personal choice. So for some people, they may say, I don't feel it's important to have myself or my parents on Geni. And if that's the case, then what I would recommend is that always when you create an account on Geni, it should be you. Don't create an account and claim to be your grandmother or your grandfather. But you also don't necessarily have to build out your own family tree. So if you're only interested in what happened more than 100 years ago, then you can do that on Geni. You can either create a skeleton tree with very little information that gets you to that point, or if you decide you want your profile completely disconnected, we have a feature on Geni called Create a Branch that lets you start a tree that's not necessarily connected to you. So you could say, all right, I'm going to create a profile on Geni as me, and then I'm going to create a branch of my great-great-grandmother, and I'm going to start building up from there. Now, what I would suggest is don't start at the brick wall, because the only way you're going to be able to compare your information with what others have is to have some context in the family tree around that. So at the very least, you want probably 2 or 3 generations leading up to your brick wall. And ideally, you're going to fill in all of the siblings and their spouses and their children, because you never know when one of those is going to turn up in an obituary, for example, that's going to contain information that may help you get past that brick wall. Quick note, too, about the obituaries, and then I'll get back to my question in the back. One of the things we do on Geni, thankful for our acquisition by MyHeritage in 2012, is that we're able to match Geni profiles against the MyHeritage records collection. So of course, if you're a MyHeritage user, this is nothing new to you. But for people who choose to build their family tree on Geni, if MyHeritage happens to have that obituary or census record, that information turns up on Geni as well. Yeah, we had a question in the back here somewhere.
Sorry for my English. I hope I can be understood. Yesterday, I went on my family tree on MyHeritage, and I found a smart march leading me to Geni.
Yes.
And I am the Geni contributor, I don't know, and me, we are not agreeing, well, it's on one of my ancestors who is supposed on Geni being the wife of Peter the First.
Okay.
And in my tree, she is the mother of Peter the First.
Got it.
And it happens in 1215. So how can we speak the one to the other to check our sources and to see whether he or she is right or I am?
Sure. Okay, that's a great question. It's complicated by the fact that you're a MyHeritage user, and this smart match has led you to information that's on Geni. So as a MyHeritage user, you can actually take advantage of the information that's on Geni with those smart matches. In this case, before you would want to do that, of course, you want to resolve this discrepancy that you see on the Geni family tree. As a MyHeritage user, there isn't going to be a way to send a message to a Geni user. So what you're going to have to do first is create a free Geni account. So you go to Geni.com, right on our homepage. You can just sign up with your name and email address. Again, there's no cost to that. And then you're going to want to go back to that profile that you find on Geni. Now that can actually be a little tricky. One of the easiest ways to do that is actually going to be to go back to Google and type Geni and the name of that Peter the First and or the wife or the mother. That may help you relocate that profile on Geni. At that point, then again, because this is a medieval profile, I would say there's no reason to do this privately. I would do this as a discussion on the profile, and I would start a discussion on that profile and say, you know, you've listed here that this woman was Peter's wife. I have this documentation that says it's his mother. You could upload that as a source to Peter's profile on Geni if you like. That gives you the opportunity to share what you have for them to look at it. Or you could get in touch privately and send it to them via email or something if that's how you personally decide to communicate. But as a starting point, if you want to contact a Geni member, you're not going to be able to reach out as a MyHeritage user. You're going to have to create a free Geni account in order to do that. Any other questions?
So, in fact, it would be a good idea if we have a family tree on MyHeritage
Yes.
to do a new one on Geni.
Maybe. So it's entirely possible that you say, I have my tree on MyHeritage and I really don't have any interest in my entire tree also being on Geni. And if that's the case, then what you can do is rely on the smart, actually I believe they show up in MyHeritage as record matches to the Geni World Family Tree. So when you see those record matches, if it looks right to you and you want to bring that information into your MyHeritage tree, when you confirm that match, just like confirming a smart match gives you the option to update your profile or add missing profiles, your record match to the Geni World Family Tree is going to let you do that as well. So it's entirely possible to take advantage of some information on Geni still working completely within your MyHeritage tree. So I would really say it's a personal choice. Do you want your family tree part of the collaborative World Family Tree or not? If you want it to be part of the collaborative World Family Tree on Geni, then the easiest way to do that to get started is to take a GEDCOM export out of MyHeritage or your desktop software, wherever you have it, and you can import your GEDCOM into Geni when you sign up. Now, note on GEDCOM export, or import rather, while we're talking about it, if you already have a tree on Geni, please do not import another GEDCOM on top of it, hoping to update your tree, because that's not what's going to happen. You're going to get a lot of duplicates. So GEDCOM import is a great way to start your tree on Geni, but I don't recommend it for updating an existing tree.
And you talked about mitochondrial DNA.
Yes.
How does that work?
Okay, so mitochondrial DNA, of course, is passed from mothers to both sons and daughters, but only the daughters are going to pass it to their children. So mitochondrial DNA is a way that you can test for matches strictly along your maternal line. So our partnership with Family Tree DNA allows you to link your Family Tree DNA account to your Geni account. It's all done via a secure authorization, and you don't have to bother with downloading results and uploading results. This is done on Geni on your DNA tab on your profile, or if you have a mitochondrial test for your mother, you can do it on the DNA tab for your mother's profile on Geni. At that point, you say, I want to link this to family tree DNA. You log in with the kit that has the mitochondrial DNA results, and usually within about 60 seconds, those results are transferred over to Geni and applied to your family tree. At that point, we're going to let you know, do you have matches on Geni, other people whose mitochondrial DNA matches your own? Noteworthy point about that, we're not matching on haplogroup because for mitochondrial DNA and even for just the STR marker tests on Y DNA, haplogroup is not an effective matching tool. So we're actually matching on the genetic mutations themselves, which is a much more accurate way to match that DNA. And we're going to tell you, are there other Geni profiles or other users on Geni who have mitochondrial DNA that match your own? And if so, with mitochondrial, when you compare the ancestors, we're smart enough to only show you the maternal line there because we know that can't happen anywhere on the fathers. So then at that point, you'll be comparing your maternal ancestor line to the maternal ancestor line of your match. Great.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you. You just talk about the jet import. And when I was starting using Geni, I think this possibility was not given anymore.
Yes, I can address that. So early on in Geni, we built a GEDCOM importer because of course we felt that was an appropriate way for you to build your family tree. And at the time, the way that GEDCOM importer worked, and I'm talking about maybe 2008 to 2011, when you imported your GEDCOM into Geni, we built the entire tree that was represented in the GEDCOM file, and then we slapped it into Geni and then tried to see if we could merge it into the world family tree. And this created a real problem for us because all of you diligent researchers who had that line that goes all the way back to Charlemagne, we had at one point 866 copies of Charlemagne on Geni. And not just him, but all of the wives and all of the children, and all of those duplicates had to be merged together. And if there were ever discrepancies, those discrepancies had to be worked out. And it created so much work, especially for our curators, that I think it was about 2011, we decided we had to turn off the GEDCOM importer in order to avoid all of that duplication. So even though you may have Charlemagne in your software at home, no offense, I don't want your Charlemagne. I've already got a really good one. He's been curated for over 10 years on Geni, and he's really well documented, and I feel pretty confident about it. So earlier this year, as promised last year in Oslo, I told you then we were going to bring back our GEDCOM importer, and it was this last March, I think, that we did bring it back. We finally turned it back on for you. And the way the GEDCOM importer works now is it's going to import 5 generations of ancestors and their siblings to start with. And that's going to bring in enough of your tree that then we can stop and start looking around for matches to what's already on Geni. So if we find a branch that has a match to something already on Geni, our suggestion to you is going to be to merge into that branch rather than creating a bunch of duplication that somebody's going to have to deal with. Hopefully you, but more commonly people walk away from it and then our poor curators end up doing the work. So when we find that match, we're going to stop on that branch and we're going to say, you need to go connect this branch to what we already have on Geni. Now, if there are other branches in that GEDCOM where there are no tree matches, then it's going to continue the import automatically. At this time, it'll be 3 generations at a time. So bring in 3 more generations on that branch, stop and look for matches, no matches, 3 more, 3 more, 3 more. So you may potentially get your entire GEDCOM on Geni if it turns out that nothing in it looks like anything we've had before. More likely what's going to happen is you're going to have a couple of lines there at least where we say, hey, we've already got those folks, let's get you connected to the world family tree on these branches, and your other branches will import completely. Great. Any other questions?
Yes, you said if I create an account and I create profiles, then I become the owner of the profile. Well, even genealogists eventually die. So what happens to the profiles that I own after I pass away? Can I set something up to transfer those to a relative who's going to take over after I'm gone?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at this point, we don't have a sort of name and heir feature, although I love the idea and I think we probably should. But what we're going to do is likely those profiles are going to end up in the hands of a nearby relative anyway. So once your account is closed because you're marked as deceased, Genie is going to automatically try to reassign a manager. Now there's several rules for how that process goes. If somebody added you to Genie, likely that's already going to be a family member who's already involved in Genie. If they're still an active user, then they will become the manager of the profiles that you added once you joined. If you started the tree yourself, if nobody invited you to join Genie, then what we're going to do is we're going to look around your family tree to find other active members there in your family tree that we can assign it to them. So in most cases, when your account is closed, management of your profiles are already going to go over to a nearby family member. Now, if you have several nearby family members and you want to pick exactly this one, that's where perhaps we need that name and heir type feature to do that. There's one exception to that, which is that if you've built a tree in isolation and that tree has never been connected to Genie's World Family Tree, when your account is closed for privacy reasons, that entire tree is going to be deleted. Yeah, question in the front here.
Following on this, if you're dead, you can't close your own
Right.
tree, so your relative doesn't know how to close it, so you still...
Right. So how do we get over that hurdle?
Yes.
So on Genie profiles, we have an actions menu. So we have main actions on the side. Those are the big things you're going to do on Genie, like view a tree or send this person a message, that sort of thing. But there's also an actions menu on the top right corner of every profile that has the less common activities that you might want to do there. On that actions menu, there's an item called report this profile. So if you have a family member who's passed away, we're not going to let you mark them deceased in most cases. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to report that profile. It'll ask you, why are you reporting this profile? And one of the reasons is going to be this person has passed on. So you file a report, you tell us the profile is deceased. At that point, we're going to, our customer service team will look at that. If the person logged in yesterday, we might challenge you on it. If their emails are bouncing and we haven't seen them back on Genie in 2 years, then we have a pretty good feeling you're right about that, at which point we'll close the account.
Is it also on MyHeritage?
I can't answer that. Don't know. Yeah, right next to you.
Could they provide a death certificate or obituary to?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it would be easier for us to know for certain that we're doing the right thing if you provide that. And if there's any question on our end, we'll reach out to you and ask for that information. How do you know this person has passed on? Because it looks like maybe it's questionable. So yeah, we're not just going to go randomly closing people's accounts because somebody says so. All right, we've got one more question here. Thank you for passing that microphone.
What do you have for in the future for us in the collaboration between Genie and MyHeritage?
Excellent question. So one of the features you have on MyHeritage I alluded to is that when you confirm a match on MyHeritage to the Genie World Family Tree, you're able to copy that information from Genie into your MyHeritage tree. That's a feature today. If you're a Genie user and you're getting matches to MyHeritage Smart Matches or Record Matches, currently you can confirm those and use those as source citations, but you're not able to copy the information over. So I don't have a time frame to promise this on right now, but I can tell you that one of the features that's on our roadmap is to give you that same ability that when you confirm a match to MyHeritage census record, for example, if that census record contains location information and family members that you don't have on Genie, we'd love for you to offer you to automatically import that information into Genie based on the information that's in that match. So that's on our roadmap. Again, don't have a firm commitment right now on time frame. Right now, the consistency checker is the next feature coming out. We've got a few more things in the works, but not much more to announce at this time. Great. Well, I think I'm about out of time, so I thank you all for your attention. If you have any other questions, please catch me now or over at the Geni booth. I'll be there for the rest of the day. Actually, I have a hands-on workshop at 12:15 in the Amstel room. So if you have more questions, if you want to get your hands on, bring your laptops over to the Amstel room, and we'll do some work on Geni there. Thank you so much.